What is happening, fishing friends? I hope your day has been awesome. I get asked so often, Debo, what are your favorite soft plastics? We're gonna narrow that down tonight and talk about my top 5 favorite soft plastic lures for the old Texas rig. I'm talking about the 5 lures that I have the most confidence in, that I can take with me anywhere, to a new body of water, to somewhere that I fish a lot, anywhere I go and have confidence that I can catch fish on a Texas rig. So what do you say? Let's take a closer look at the first bait, which just happens to be the old Pitboss. Man, this is a lure that I have caught hundreds of fish on because it's priced right and it just flat out works. This bait is no secret. This has been on the market for quite some time. I don't know how long, but I've fished them for the past, I don't know how many years, with a ton of success. I like it so much because it's just such a good all-purpose flipping bait. You can see it's got the 4 little appendages back here that flap. They kind of do this motion when they go down. It's got a good slender body, good slender here. When it goes through anything, it gets real thin, fits through anything really nicely so it's not getting stuck. The action of these little appendages isn't too crazy and aggressive, but they do move. You know, some of them out there, the appendages don't move, and some of them are really crazy. So I feel like the Pitboss is just a really good in-between lure. I always fish the 4-inch size of these. I think that's the most versatile. When I'm rigging these babies up, I go with a 4/0 extra wide gap hook, just like that baby right there. Usually a 3/8 ounce tungsten weight's my weight of choice. I do have a peg on here, but when I rig them up, just go down in there just past the bar, pop that out. And the nice thing about these is they're extremely weedless. Pop that baby around like so. I always hold the hook up next to the bait to see where I need to go. Mark that off, come straight up through so my bait looks nice and centered. And it sits right there. You can see it's got a little channel there for the hook to sit in, so you don't even have to actually Texpose it. And if you're new to bass fishing, that just means taking that plastic and just gently putting it over the tip of that hook. But with a bait like this where it's got a channel like that, unless you're flipping in really heavy stuff, you don't even need to. You can just leave it like that, which is nice because when that bass bites it and pushes that down, that hook's already there and ready to go. An extra wide gap hook on any sort of soft-bodied plastic like this, I want to make sure that that bait can slide down, push down against the belly of that hook, and give me a good wide gap right there to set the hook. With an extra wide gap like this, there's a lot more room for that bait to move down in the belly of this hook. A smaller, thinner, just regular worm hook doesn't do as well. When it comes to colors, I keep it pretty darn simple. This is my favorite color of all. This is green pumpkin with purple flake. By far my favorite. You can use it in really any watercolor, unless it's super, super dirty, but I still use green pumpkin and it works. And I like it because, see all those little purple flakes? It mimics a bluegill extremely well. Look at that, shining off there. Yeah, you can swim that baby back to you. It's money. Now, besides that, I also go with the green pumpkin green flake in there. You can see that one looks pretty good. If you're in really dirty water, black and blue is extremely hard to beat. That dark color makes a really nice silhouette. Or if you're in cleaner water, you can try the Okeechobee Craw. That's one I've wanted to experiment with more this year. I didn't get to, but it's an interesting color. I want to throw that more. So that's bait number 1, the old Pitboss 4-inch, a very versatile little flipping bait. The second bait I pull out when the bite's a little bit tougher and I want something that doesn't have as big, crazy, and aggressive of an action. I go with the Reaction Innovation Sweet Beaver. This thing is killer. Beaver style bait, these back tails, they don't move or anything. It looks just like a beaver tail there, hence beaver. If you put a little tiny 1/4 ounce weight on this and throw this baby when the bite's a little bit more finicky, I have better luck with something like this. You can see on this bait the profile of it. It's extremely slender. When I'm pitching at real high percentage areas in a bunch of really thick wood and cover, this is definitely the bait I go with, or even vegetation. Something like this, extremely slender profile that's not gonna get caught up. Anytime I'm flipping those areas where there's a whole bunch of brush, little tiny limbs where it's all congested, I need to get something small and compact in there. The Beaver is the best way I have found to go. Now, normally I fish it on the exact same rig, a 4/0 extra wide gap hook, again, for those reasons I talked about before. 3/8 ounce sinker, again, unless I want to go finesse. If I'm fishing real shallow water, 3-4 foot, I can drop down, put that little 1/4 ounce weight on here. This has a little bit more subtle action. It kind of comes down and kind of glides as it goes through. It's not as aggressive. It's not as quick as a coming down through and dropping with a heavier weight. Now, one thing you'll notice with this bait, you can see in the middle of it is a channel. Also these ribs point forward. So as that bait's coming down through the water, these are displacing water and pushing water off. But as you can see in the middle here, that's kind of where the hook is supposed to sit. You can tear through that, after a couple fish with the hook. So to make that bait last longer, instead of just keeping it there and fighting it, going back and forth through, I'll just Texpose off to the side like that. So your bait's not going to sit 100% straight, but when I'm flipping and pitching anyway, I don't think the fish are going to notice that little tiny offset. So that's a way you can keep using this bait, keep switching sides. You can make that bait last a whole lot longer instead of just ripping out that middle and saying, oh, it's tore up, I'm going to a new one. So again, hook size, 3/0 or a 4/0 extra wide gap hook. Again, any of these bigger baits, with more meat, I want that extra wide gap to ensure I'm gonna get a hook set. Colors, I really keep it to 3. By far, my #1 favorite is this, Tramp Stamp. Love that color. It's like a black with a blue flake on top. You flip it around, it's got a green pumpkin with black flake. Killer color. I've had a bunch of luck with that in dirty or just, normally stained water. Now, if you're in extremely, really dirty stuff, you can go with Hematoma. It's like black with kind of blue swirlies in it. Or if you're over in that just slightly stained water, go over to Dirty Sanchez. That's a green pumpkin on top and a chartreuse green on bottom. So those are the 3 colors I reach for in that. The old Sweet Beaver from Reaction Innovations, killer little beaver style bait. So let's go to the opposite end of the spectrum and talk about a bait that has a lot of action. When I want to go with something that's got a whole lot of fluttery action, it is extremely hard to beat the old Strike King Rage Craw. The thing that's awesome about the Rage Craw are these little pinchers. You can see here they have little cups on the end of them, and those cups catch water and they just kick a very aggressive fluttering action. So in the summer months when the fish are aggressive, they're willing to eat, they're willing to chase baits, I like to go with a more aggressive, flappy, something that's got action to get those fish's attention. 9 times out of 10, this is the summer bait I'm reaching for when I would just want something, flip and pitch it cover. This thing is awesome. Whether I'm fishing large isolated logs, where there's a big line of shade under it, or if I'm flipping, bushes, any sort of shade line. In the summer, you find that shade, and generally that's where you're gonna find your bass on those high sun days. I also like carrying this because it's twofold. If I wanna flip a Texas rig in the real heavy stuff, I can, but I can also throw this baby on the back of the jig. Again, probably my favorite summertime jig trailer. Now you can go with these. They also make the Rage chunks that are really made specifically for the jig, but I like carrying these because I can either rig it like this for a Texas rig or throw it on the jig either way. It's nice and versatile. The other nice thing about this is that action. I can swim this baby back when I've got a nice hook like this. I can swim this baby on the way back with that little weight, bounce it off rocks, bump it over stuff, and swim it straight back just like I would any sort of, swim jig, and that action gives it what you need. As far as the hook on this, I like to go with a 3/0 heavy cover, flipping hook. And I completely forgot to mention that for the Sweet Beaver or the Havoc Pitboss, either one, you can go with a heavy cover flipping hook on those as well. It just depends on what you prefer. I generally lean towards the EWG hook, but if you like the heavy cover flipping hooks like this, just a straight shank flipping hook, go with those as well. It'll work on any of these 3. I tend to like a 3/0 flipping hook for this because I'm generally not throwing it in the super heavy stuff. I generally have one of these tied on and a Beaver even in the summer. Just in case I get against the real thick stuff, I'm gonna throw this, but I'll still throw this around sparse wood. I can crawl it up over stuff. Again, these pinchers do most of the work for you. When it comes to colors with this guy, I keep it simple. My dirty water or, really muddy water color is of course the black and blue. That dark color makes a really good silhouette, and that's what you want in that really dirty water so the fish can pick it up. Or if the water's a little bit cleaner, I will go with a summer craw, which just has a little bit of chartreuse on it, kind of that green pumpkin back, or just the straight green pumpkin. Either way, you're not gonna go wrong with those 2 colors in the old Strike King Rage Craw. Now it's time to get into my specialty soft plastics. This is a bait that my old man taught me to fish a long time ago. I remember on those old dog days of summer where the sun's high, it's blazing hot out, not a cloud in the sky, time to reach for a ribbon tail worm. Because they're just so darn effective on those really hot days, the fish aren't gonna be up actively feeding, running around, you've gotta find them. You're looking for shade pockets, any sort of cover, and especially standing timber. This was always a go-to for us. Most of the lakes around here have big flooded timber spots. That timber is just standing straight up like this. Those fish will literally have their nose stuck right up to it. So you've almost got to hit them on the head sometimes with one of these, and this action on a worm like this is just awesome. The ribbon tail goes straight down, throw it at that piece of timber, bounce it a couple times, drag it extremely slow out of there to try and get any fish to bite it, and then take it out. And then you're just trying to cover water, trying to flip and pitch as much of that standing timber as you can. Now the other cool thing about a big worm like this is you can drag them. So anytime we would get to a hump or a rocky point where it was a good solid bottom, not real big boulders, but just a good hard bottom, you drag a worm. You can throw this in around, cover on that standing timber, but you can also take it, and if you don't have a, a weight pegged on it, cast it out there and you're just dragging that point, just moving it with the tip of your rod, barely dragging that bait. It's time to slow down in the summer and it's hard to beat a big worm like this. This happens to be a 10-inch worm. My old man tends to go with the 7-inch power bait. That's his favorite, whichever you prefer, but just a ribbon tail worm like this is killer in the summer. The only time I don't really fish a worm like this is, again, when I'm in that real brushy cover where it's, you know, a whole bunch of little tiny sticks. I don't throw a big ribbon tail worm like this because the tail will end up getting caught in like this, and you can get hung up. It ends up pulling down your hook, and it's just kind of a pain. Again, any type of cover like that where it's really, really thick, I'm reaching for a sweet beaver. But just tall standing timber or, you know, big logs where I'm dragging it over like this, or again, those hard bottoms, a ribbon tail worm like this is killer. And when it comes to a hook for one of these, you can see how thin the body is. I'm going over to just a regular round bend worm hook. The nice thing about a round bend worm hook like this is you don't need that big, huge fat belly for a tiny, you know, little thin bait like this. I've fished them like this and you can do that, but my old man for sure 100% has always thrown and has always told me to throw, you know, a round bend worm hook. You can see the point is not in line with the eye of the hook. So like this, the eye of that hook is in line, pretty close to in line with the point of that hook. So when that fish grabs it like this, you can see that as the mouth goes over, boom, he's getting hooked right away. You don't need a big, huge, crazy hook belly on it. You can still rig it weedless, but once that worm pushes down, you've still got enough room to get a good hook set. Now for the smaller 7-inch worms like this, I'll usually go with a 4-aught, kind of like the package says. Again, my 4-aught's kind of my go-to. When I go up to these bigger worms, these 10-inch worms like this, I like to go up to a 6-aught if I have them. Otherwise, a 5-aught, I've usually always got one of those on me. 5 or 6-aught hook. Now, when it comes to colors, I keep it simple, just like I've been telling you all along. My general go-to is a green pumpkin with a purple flake. So I'll throw this in kind of any stained, dirty-ish, dingy water. But as I go to the really dirty stuff, I always go to a black. Black and purple is generally my color. This is the Zoom Old Monster. So that's a 10.5-inch worm in blackberry, but a black and purple, but you could go black and blue, whatever you prefer. Or if I am fishing a power bait, I like this black grape. But again, it's about that dark color in the really dirty water that makes a good outline and silhouette. That's what you want. Now my old man's favorite color, well, he is always throwing a power bait in Tequila Sunrise. That's been his favorite. I remember going on the boat with him and his buddies. Tequila Sunrise power baits. That's what they were always throwing. So let's take a look at the last one. The final bait in the lineup is none other than the old Zoom Brush Hog. Yeah, this happens to be my favorite bait to throw when I'm not actually pegging it, and I'll tell you why. Generally on most of the other ones, you know, when I'm flipping and heavy stuff, I've got a weight on here and I've got a peg. So that way I can push that peg and weight down so it all stays as one unit so it can come straight through any sort of cover or wood, anything like that. For whatever reason, I usually don't run that with a peg at all. So when I'm fishing on the outsides of grass lines, when I'm fishing larger wood, you know, dragging it over it, this thing just does work. I don't know why, but it does work the best for me when I don't peg it. Now, of course, you can do that with any of those baits, anything that has action. And generally, most people will say if you can get away with it, don't peg it, or at least move that peg up so this weight has room to move. As the weight goes down and hits first, the bait kind of comes after and looks a little bit more natural. So I know generally people say a good rule of thumb is if you don't need to peg it, don't. But I always just put the peg on no matter what, anytime, and just move it all the way up my line. That way I don't have to worry about it, and if I get to real heavy cover, I can just move my peg back down. Now this also happens to be my go-to bait generally when I'm dragging something. So again, when I talked about those rock points on the, you know, the worm, you can drag a worm, but for whatever reason, if I'm dragging rocky points or, you know, little rocky humps, this seems to be the bait. For whatever reason, this seems to be the bait that gets me the most bites. Don't know why, it's kind of situational. Maybe it's just in my head, but I like to go to this bait when I'm doing a real slow drag on open spots like that. Now around here, I generally have the most luck on the baby Brush Hog. It's a little bit smaller. They also make the larger. You can see the regular Brush Hog there. Let me take one out and show you like that side by side. So you can see there, the normal full octane Brush Hog is quite a bit bigger than this little guy. So the little one I seem to have a little bit more luck on around here, but don't be afraid to throw this guy too. I've had good luck on this as well, especially if you're hunting those bigger bass in Florida and Texas. Throw that bigger bait, baby. When it comes to hooks on this, on the small guy, I go to a 3-aught EWG hook. On the bigger guy, I go back to that, you know, normal 4-aught extra wide gap hook. That's kind of my standard go-to. If I can fish that, I'm fishing that heavy wire 4-aught EWG. Just like it because it's so weedless. And I know a lot of people will argue that you're going to have a better hookup ratio on a flipping hook, but hey, whatever you like more and have confidence in, that's what you should use. As far as colors, it's hard to go wrong with just the regular green pumpkin like this. I know a lot of people like the green pumpkin red flake. You can see that in there, makes it look just a little bit different. And for really dark, dirty, dingy water, I always go to a June bug. I like the Zoom June bug color. Kind of my secret color that I'm going to let you guys in on is this watermelon candy. For any sort of just dingy-ish, dirty, normal, everyday water, this for me has been the killer. It's got green, as you can see there, and purple flakes in it. So again, I don't know if that's also mimicking the bluegill and just getting me that many more bites, or if it's, you know, mimicking a craw in some sort of stage. I don't know, but for whatever reason, that green and purple around here in Iowa seems to kill it for me. So that watermelon candy in the old Zoom Brush Hog is killer. So that's gonna do it, Fish and Friends, for all these flippin' Texas rig. Those are my top 5 baits that I use, but let me know in the comment section below, what are your favorite Texas rig baits? Is it a Beaver? Is it a Brush Hog? Or maybe you just absolutely love the old Rage Craws. Whatever it is, let me know in the comments below. I love hearing from all of you. It's very interesting to hear the wide spectrum, and especially with soft plastics, I know there are gonna be people out there throwing out weird stuff that I have probably not even heard about. Make sure you leave those comments below and let me know. There might be some new cool stuff that I wanna try next year. Thank you all very much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you Fish and Friends out there. So until next time.